business. His name is Michael Ballen. You won't have recognized him because to date he's always appeared in costume roles, but apart from his acting potential, there's something else about him that makes him just that little bit special.
Hello, shop. Anybody there? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Can I help you?
Mike Ballen is used to being overlooked. When you're only 3 feet tall, this sort of episode is an everyday occurrence. Even the simple business of getting through a door takes a bit of ingenuity. In fact, Mike's magic umbrella seems to have an infinite number of uses. It even keeps off the rain. As yet, though, he's had no success with round doorknobs. Michael Henbury Ballen, to give him his full name, is the shortest man in Britain. For 10 years he's worked as a customs officer in Southampton. He's 28 now, but he first realized his lack of stature when he was only 5, and his twin brother began to look down on him. Brother Malcolm grew to 5 feet 9. It must have infuriated him, but somehow they still get along.
Yeah, we're very close, even though we're very complete opposites. We are very close.
In what way complete opposites apart from size?
Well, I'm very outgoing, and where Malcolm is, likes to stay at home and likes the quiet life.
It was Mike's outgoing nature that got him into the Guinness Book of Records. He got in touch with them. It also helped him at school.
I don't know, maybe I was lucky, but everyone just wanted to be my friend, really, and they used to fight to sit next to me in class and what have you, so it was a nice feeling, really, being so popular.
I suppose in a way it depends on your own attitude towards yourself, doesn't it?
That's right, yes. I mean, I just treat myself like anyone else, you know, and I act like anyone else as far as I'm concerned.
Mike may be small, but he thinks big, and his extrovert charm has swept him into the movies. This was the set of the film Labyrinth, starring David Bowie, and there, believe it or not, is Mike Ballen. Dressed as a non-speaking goblin, even his best friend wouldn't recognize him. How to be a star when few people know which goblin you are.
Jump, magic jump, jump, magic jump.
But Mike has certainly rubbed shoulders with the stars. He was in Return of the Jedi, where he got close to Luke Skywalker, otherwise known as the actor Mark Hamill.
I like mixing with people, trying, friendship's important to me, and I try and do as much for other people as they do for me.
What sort of things do you do for other people?
Well, I drive a car, and, you know, so I like driving around, and I usually pick up mates if we're going out and things like that, so, you know, so I give and take on both sides.
Mike is able to drive his Metro with the aid of just one control that acts as both accelerator and brake, and he always travels with a stepladder. I would find out why later. He may be only 3 feet tall, but he has a passion for sport, not just watching, but playing it.
Table tennis is the number one, I suppose.
How do you manage to play table tennis?
With a bat, really, like anyone else.
All right.
No, but actually, although the table is high and what have you, I can do various shots that cause opponents, you know, as much difficulty as they can cause me by just tapping it over the net.
Really?
So it works both ways, really.
Mike also plays five-a-side soccer with his Custom House colleagues. He says he models himself on Glenn Hoddle and leaves the running to the rest. Right now, they're off for a team talk in the pub.
Hi, how you doing, right? What are we having then, lads?
Pass Stella mine.
Half a lager, please.
Oh, you get all that?
This is Stella and half lager.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
and a bit of mine, Malibu and lemonade, please. Yeah, you know me. Always on the shots.
The talk today is about dropping one of the team, the one who's not here. But who's going to tell him? It's the manager's job.
It's the manager, lads. Oh, I am.
You're the manager,
Oh, yeah,
mate.
well.
You
Can't
made the
shuck this one,
decisions.
you're going to have to tell him.
Shut this one, no.
Sorry,
Well, maybe he could be sub, huh? He's not with it, is he?
When they're not playing, the lads go out to watch their heroes. Southampton.
When we go to football, we've got to carry a step ladder, you know. We've got to carry him, you know, because we're always late to the grounds, because he always drives, see, and he sort of he times it so late we sort of get there for half time, so we're running around the grounds carrying him. So
Did you say step ladder?
Yeah, we carry a step ladder as well. Yeah.
What step ladder's that?
Well, it's because he can't see. You know?
He gets a lot of stick from us, but he takes it all in his stride, which is good.
What kind of stick?
Wow. As you probably heard earlier, when he comes through doors and the doors swing open and there's nobody there, and he takes stick about his work rate, which is almost non-existent, and it's his attitude. He knows he's a star, and he lets everybody else know it as well.
I think you'll get it though.
Whatever the game, Mike plays it with a will and a wit. His ambition is to play in more movies. He's currently discussing a fantasy film with George Lucas, the man who made Star Wars. In the meantime, back in the real world, if you happen to visit Custom House in Southampton, watch out when that door magically swings open. It could be Mike Ballon coming to check you out. He's a nice fellow, I can tell you. More of Michael Ballon in the 40 Minutes documentary on small people on BBC Two. That's at 9:30 this evening.
Look at today's main news headline.
I've seen small people. I know when I was 12, actually, I went to Olympia. My parents took me, and I saw these little midgets, and I thought they were absolutely gorgeous. And I used to say, oh, I'd love a little man, and my father nearly died in case they heard.
From Dopey and Grumpy and Snow White to the modern circus clown. From the elves and goblins of our childhood nightmares to the miniature villains of James Bond. Dwarves receive our love and fear, laughter and revulsion, superstition and ridicule. But any one of us could have such a handicapped child, handicapped not just by his size, but by how we look at him.
It's bad enough being teased or made fun of or laughed at. When people patronise you, it's really frustrating, especially when they think because you are physically handicapped, though I don't like that word, they think you must be mentally handicapped as well. There must be, you must be very soft in the head or something. And also, I suppose it's because if you are short, they tend to assume that you have the mentality of a child.
I never went to circuses as a child. To see the little clown being thrown around used to horrify me. But I felt that they were exploited not because of their talent, but because of their physical disabilities. The crowd were laughing at that and not the talent.
They call themselves persons of restricted growth to avoid painful associations.
I resent being called midget because I know what the difference is between a midget and a dwarf. I've only been called a dwarf once, and I was so pleased. I was over the moon because if everyone went around calling me dwarf, I wouldn't mind because I am a dwarf and I know I'm a dwarf.
I don't like it at all. I had it shouted at me so many times as a child, which always put me into a slot on my own. And also, it was always the dwarf that got beaten by the Prince Charming. And he was always the one that was caused the trouble in the fairy tales. And I didn't want to be linked with that.
And I think if you keep hearing it, people saying midget, 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 you're getting so sick of it that you just had enough. And I felt like giving them a right walloping, if you know what I mean.
Bye-bye, love. Take care.
Frances Gaywood is 16 and lives in Dagenham. When her natural parents discovered her condition, they refused to care for their child, and a foster home had to be found.
I was asked if I would foster Francis, you know, I've been a foster parent for quite a number of years now, and I was asked to take Francis as a young baby of about, I think she was just about 11 weeks old at the time, and obviously said yes. It was a short-term thing, I understood, something like for 3 months, and that's how it started, and she just never went back, and we adopted her when she was about 3.5, so she's mine.
When I was born, my mum and dad didn't want me. I kept on asking why did they leave me, and I was just too young to understand.
There is a great variety of bone diseases, most of them very rare, which also cause short stature.
12 years ago, Olive Gaywood took her newly adopted daughter Frances to the Great Ormond Street Hospital's growth clinic for tests. There they confirmed that Frances had achondroplasia, one of the many different varieties of dwarfism.
The child with achondroplasia is perhaps the nearest approach to the common idea of a dwarf. The facial appearance is typical, with snub nose and pug expression. The bodily proportions, muscularity and gait are usually characteristic. X-rays of the skull, hips and limbs confirm the diagnosis.
I don't like my legs because they're fat. I don't like my arms because they're short and stumpy, but I used to like swimming, but now I've got to the age of 16 where I won't go. I'm so ashamed of it.
Like many dwarves, Frances as a child didn't realise she was different.
Well, I don't think she really questioned it. Not until almost the first time we went to one of the meetings for the people of restricted growth, and she became aware that she was like the people there, and she began to ask questions then. Why was she small? Would she grow up to be like the people there, which she found rather frightening at first?
I think that's because I was coming into my teens and still getting interested in boys, and I don't know why, but I never got asked that. I sit there going, what the hell am I being asked that? And I did tell my mum, oh, no one fancies me and all this. And she told me, and I realised from then onwards. But I still haven't got over it, because there are times when I do get depressed, or even if people stare at me, I do get a bit down about that, although I shouldn't. Wide-eyed looks on, oh, look at that and all this. You get, sometimes, I've had one woman serve me at a shop, and she's just given me such a bad look, and she's actually asked someone else to serve me, which I could not get over, which really annoyed me so much. And well, I was served, but you can't really do anything about it because it's their attitude towards you. You have to live through it. But at first it used to really get me down, and I used to cry my eyes out. But then I thought, I'm not the only person in the world that's small. Thought I'd never get a boyfriend, but I've been out with one. He was very nice to me, treated me like a lady. We was laughed at a couple of times when we went out together. But I was a bit shy because I'd never been out with a boy that was small like myself. I could say it was a bit embarrassing, not on his behalf, but I'll always be there.
No, I think I love it. I think that looks all right. Thanks. Yeah, I love that one.
Like that one.
Yeah, thanks.
Mike Ballon has several severe medical handicaps, among them dwarfism. He's just 37 inches tall, the smallest man in Britain. But his mother and his twin brother Malcolm are of normal size.
My mum, she's had a very powerful influence on me. I'm not one who's always shown my feelings like some of my brothers and sister. And she's meant a lot to me, and what I've achieved in life is because of my mum, because of the way she's brought me up.
Improving.
Get the full 10 in a minute. You and me.
Where was it, Mike?
It was always my dear wish to have twin boys. Absolutely over the moon when, I mean, I didn't know until they were actually born. We had a single pram on order, you know, and so I got enough clothes. People used to say for two, but of course when you had two, it was a different matter, you know. So it was panic stations, and everybody was knitting, my mother and my mother-in-law, you know. I don't think they really knew at first. They said something was slightly wrong. How can I describe it? He looked as though, you know, when the chicken's ready for the table, no shoulders, tight up, folded, like little wings for, what didn't look like he had arms, hands, just very tiny, as though they were on his, just resting on his wrist. And of course his feet were completely back to front. But, and she said, oh, go away and forget about having a twin and just bring up Malcolm. But for a while, every day, she used to come in with a medical book and show me horrendous pictures, you know what I mean, of how he would be when he grew up, you know. But I wouldn't accept it. I was determined he was going to grow up normally, you know. And when he first went into hospital, I said, no, you're going to cry. Mum's going to cry. So I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my head under the sheets, and you do the same, then nobody else will know you're crying. And I said, we'll both have a week together, you know. Oh dear, it brings a lump to my throat when I think about it. But that's what he said, that's what I did, you know. I just cry, you know, which is natural, because, I mean, you know, you all weep. I mean, I can weep now, you know, thinking about it, because, I mean, he had to have some horrendous operations, you know. And the specialist said, oh yes, he can go to an ordinary school. Because at first, you see, they tried to tell me he was sort of retarded, you know. That was another thing the midwife had told me. And I was thinking, no, never, never, you know what I mean? Because he was quite bright. I mean, he could make us understand, so I thought never. And so I managed to find a school at the lower end of town in French Street, and they were marvellous. And to make him look like a normal lad sat there at the same height, they made a special chair with a little step up. Because I said, treat him completely normal. This was the difficulty of other people treating him normally, you know, not spoiling him.
I never really took it upon myself that he was really small. Never really came across to me. You know, he was just my brother, and that was it.
I sort of looked after Malcolm, my twin brother, because Malcolm was on the skinny side and wore glasses and that. And it was quite easy for these to pick on.
Mike and I were at infant school, and he decided, he asked Mum if he could take up boxing lessons so that he could protect me in case I ever got bullied. Also, I mean, if we ever had any arguments, the simple way to deal with it, I used to just pick him up, put him outside the door and shut the door on him. So I would get with just a hurl of abuse coming through the door, but he could never hit me or anything. No, we're both very, very different. I mean, not only in size, but in personality. Michael enjoys all the sort of sports, physical activities, and being very sociable, having lots of people around him. Whereas I tend to enjoy, I suppose, the arts, reading. I tend to enjoy just a small group of people around me. I tend to be a bit of a loner, but he's the opposite.
Can I go outside? It's getting a bit warm.
Yeah, well, just like any other normal male, you know, I like girlfriends and have my fair share. And funny enough, they've all been of normal height, really. I'm 5'2" and what have you. So I've been quite lucky there. So I suppose it just proves that by being yourself, it doesn't matter what size you are. And at the moment, I'm going steady with a girl from Liverpool. and hopefully things will work out between us.
I mean, I laugh and joke and I say, we better take your stepladder with you, you know, and things like this, you know, to make it light so that, you know, he feels completely all right. But, yeah, you do feel, because you know that the odds are stacked against him in a way. But as I say, there's somebody that, I think in women especially, they like to mother a man as well, don't they? As well as love him, their friend, the lover and the companion. So I think, as I say, there's somebody somewhere, I think, for him even, you know. And he's had some lovely girlfriends. But I think another thing is he sort of goes desperate, you know, and wants to grab them to keep them, you know. He's just got to learn to let things go as they go, you know.
Sadly for Mike, this relationship wasn't to last.
But there are things I know he'd love to do. I know he loves football. He'd love to get on the field and be able to play properly, which he can't do because of his size, or it makes it very difficult for him to do. I've seen his difficulties as they've developed as he's grown older, but I mean, through a lot of the times when he had problems, I always try to be on hand to help him out. I mean, when he was small, it was often the simple things like just getting a drink, or cooking something or whatever, or turning the grill on. I mean, these little things I tend to do naturally without thinking. They've become part and parcel of my whole life. In fact, when he disappeared and stayed with friends for several months, a couple of years ago, I actually felt left out on a limb, because all these little tasks that I used to do, I suddenly didn't do anymore. And I suddenly noticed it left quite a gap within my own sort of life.
If there was anything that people had doubts about me, I always like to try and prove them wrong. And driving was another example where people didn't really think I would be able to manage. And so I was fairly determined. And I passed the 9 lessons first time as well, so that's quite a nice achievement. That's the very first time I'm about 10 feet tall when the examiner told me I passed. Great moment.
Mike is something of a celebrity, having played several film roles. A cuddly bear in Star Wars and a goblin in David Bowie's film Labyrinth.
Hello, Mike. Pleased to meet you.
And you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is Mr. Knight, our headmaster.
Welcome to Gomer Junior School, Mr. Ballon. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Would you like to come over and open our summer fair for us?
Yeah, certainly would. I'm very pleased that you invited me here this afternoon. I hope you have a wonderful time and you've all got plenty of money on you to spend like I have. And I declare the fete open. Thank you.
It may be just a genetic accident, but if you are a person of restricted growth, there's a 50-50 chance that any child of yours will also be one. Gladys Nicholson and her daughter Sandra have 2 generations' worth of experience of coping with their handicap and with everyone else's attitude towards it.
When I was born, they didn't know that I was of restricted growth till about 3 months. They wondered why at the time I was of restricted growth. They didn't put a name to it. And they could find no hereditary reasons why this happened.
Gladys spent years undergoing hospital tests.
You know, like in gymnasiums, they have the bars up the walls. I was lifted up and held on and just hung for a few minutes with the idea that it would stretch my limbs. But, I mean, we know better nowadays that this just doesn't happen. The one thing they worried about was my bottom protruding, and they gave me an exercise to try and straighten that curvature of the spine, but even then that didn't make any difference at all. I don't know why, but I always knew it wasn't going to be a tall person for me. It was going to be a person of restricted growth. I always knew I would get married, I'd have a lace dress, which I planned, and I mean, it wasn't until I was 32 that this happened.
Halfway down the stairs is a stair where I sit. There isn't any other stair quite like it. I'm not at the bottom, I'm not at the top. So this is the stair where I always stop. Halfway up the stairs isn't up and isn't down. It isn't in the nursery, it isn't in the town. And all sorts of funny thoughts run round my head. It isn't really anywhere, it's somewhere else instead.
I'm in a tall world. I'd like to marry someone tall because that's my way of thinking. And when I go out with people of restricted growth, I feel more aware of my height. I forget when I'm with my friends. And it's only you only remembered when you're seen in a window or a mirror, and you sort of suddenly think, God, that's me, sort of thing. But I'd like a tall husband, preferably.
For the last 4 years, Sandra has been fatherless. Her mother, Gladys, recently met Bernard Brooks at a meeting for people of restricted growth, and soon they plan to marry.
Your stuff's over.
Oh, you got the...
Your case is under there.
Oh, yeah. But I don't want to give that car. I'm a bit worried about that.
Well, get your bits out and then you can go and see to it.
For 40 years, Bernard has worked as a watch repairer, a job where his size is at worst an irrelevance, and at best perhaps an advantage. In his social life, it's always been a hindrance.
The teenage years were the worst because by then I'd got used to my friends at school, and we all started going in different directions, and they had girlfriends, and naturally I wanted the same. And my first instance of that, asking a girl for a date, she laughed at me hysterically and told her friends, and they also laughed hysterically. And I realised then it wasn't going to be easy. Some of them took a rather sisterly attitude towards me, but nevertheless I was seen around with them, and that to me was an important thing. There were other girls later that I found that going into a public place or to a bar, the boys of the day wanted to take her away from me. It seemed to be a challenge to their manhood. I was in a store, and suddenly I saw this woman coming with her arms wide apart towards me, and I thought, my God, she's going to lift me up. She suddenly crouched down beside me and hugged me and kissed me, and she said, now you can at least say, you can't say that no woman has ever put her arms round you and kissed you before. And disappeared into the crowd as suddenly as she came.
What did you feel?
I felt rather amused because I felt that she was a bit too late. I felt extremely low, almost suicidal at times, because it was important to me, the same as it is important to most people. But I didn't want to be any different to anybody else. Yes, I came to terms with it mainly when I accepted the fact that I was small, because prior to that I wouldn't even look in a mirror, or even in a shop window. But when I finally decided to accept the whole thing and look in the mirror and not worry about it anymore, then it doesn't matter to me anymore.
Tom Shakespeare is in his final year at Cambridge studying political science. His parents, Sir William and Lady Shakespeare, live in Aylesbury, where his father is a family doctor.
Morning. Recorded delivery.
Will you just sign on the line there?
Thank you.
Thanks very much. There you go.
Right, thank you. Bye.
Nothing very interesting. A bill, a postcard from Scotty, nothing from Thomas.
Are we going down there on Sunday to collect him, do you think, or...?
Well, I imagine so, but we will wait to hear from him, really.
Perhaps he'll ring up.
Oh, perhaps.
Hopefully. He's a wretch, isn't he, really?
Having a short child must be something of a shock, a child in any way abnormal. But when my father was already short and my mother and all our family could see that that was no problem, he was very successful. The fact that I was short, obviously it must cause them some grief, I don't know, but that they would be aware that it wasn't, as it were, the end of the world. It wasn't a sentence of a sort of incapability for life.
We knew that there was a 50-50 chance of having an affected child, but in those days there was no means of determining whether the child would be affected beforehand. And we obviously wanted to have children very much. So really, it just happened. And obviously when Thomas was born, we were expecting that he might be affected, and he was.
I'm sure it did upset your father.
I think
I think he was very anxious about the outcome of this.
Yeah. I think he probably would have rather we didn't have children, and I can see that in a way. I mean, he, being a perfectly normal person, and my mother was quite normal, produced me, and I suppose, in a sense, he felt a bit responsible for having an abnormal child. And then when we started to have a family, when Sue was going to have a baby, I suppose, in a sense, he felt that if we had an affected child, then, you know, he would be also responsible for that.
Their second child, James, born 4 years after Tom, is now 15 and of normal height. Despite his size, Tom keeps anything but a low profile. A self-confident extrovert, political activist, and pint-sized punk. He's a tribute to his father's uncompromising insistence that he should have, as far as possible, an ordinary childhood.
I was determined that he should have as normal a life as possible, the best education that we could afford, and be brought up in more or less the same way as I was.
Yeah. I relish, in a way, being different. I want to be successful in politics and do something for the liberation campaign, especially disabled liberation. And I don't in any way want to be average or normal, and therefore being short, standing out, will be very useful, I'm sure.
Oh, wow.
Oh, look.
Delicious.
I'm a revolutionary, nobody needs a drum.
Oh,
or is this in the Thatcherite stage of 1984 speak?
After the Arts Council grant, I definitely have some...
Did we miss out on the progress on top?
Well, no.
Okay, so basically they're just writing that's what you're telling us your life story.
You also
to fill in the hours and for them.
You also missed out on Tom and I rolling around on foot.
But the groves of academia are a protected environment, and soon Tom will find himself in a larger world, competing for a job. Francis had 30 interviews before finally finding work.
I'll just tell you my experience. I've gone into jobs and they've taken one glance at me and they've said, no, sorry, either you're too small, the job's gone, make up any stupid excuse, which I think most people go through. But I've been very lucky. I went for about 30 interviews and then I got this job at the publishers. But like, they make up any excuse, make you look stupid, and then you know the real reason because you're small. Can you pass the post, please? Well, hopefully I'd like to go into acting, but I thought I'll get an office job, see how it goes. So you need a lot of money behind you, and I've got prospects at this job. But I would love to have done hairdressing as well.
Francis, can I get you to take this one to Mike?
Yeah.
See if he wants to send a reply.
Yeah. It wasn't until like I was about age 14 I realised I wouldn't be able to do it because I wasn't tall enough. I wouldn't be able to reach the hair for a start, and I'd have to have stools, which would be quite dangerous because if I fell on the scissors or anything, washing people's hair I could slip. So there was quite a few things that got in my way, really.
Being a celebrity is more of a psychological help than a financial one. It took Mike some time to persuade anyone to give him a steady job.
I was unemployed for about 6 months, and I found it then really that it wasn't such a rosy place and not everything was going to fall into place. And that's when it really dawned on me that I had to really sort of fight for what I wanted in life. Chris, can you ask us to I was fortunate to get employment in the civil service as a customs officer through an entrance exam. But even then I had to go on a trial basis for health reasons. But once I got through that, I felt part of the team really of customs officers. But I did find it difficult when I first started working. It was a different world from school days and what have you, and there was things I wanted to do that wasn't really possible, and I had to adapt in my own way, sort of thing.
People couldn't believe that he could cope. This was the thing, so it had to be extra hard for him. He was just like one of them, you know, which now, I mean, he goes along to the football matches. He's one of the lads, you know. He goes out for a drink. I mean, he plays table tennis, snooker. I mean, it takes a lot for them to beat him at snooker and table tennis. I mean, anything, as I say, anything. He's into it, you know.
Well, I might have done it without remembering.
You were so drunk last night, you could have done anything without remembering. At the risk of looking ridiculous, I dyed my hair because I was getting very bored of looking the same, and so I dyed it with ridiculous spots on it, which caused a lot of people quite a few problems. And one of my best friends had hysterics. She just couldn't cope with it. And when she eventually picked herself up off the floor after about 10 minutes, I was getting really pissed off. She said, "But look, you're so middle class, you're so middle-aged. Look, you're normal, you're so normal. You're so ordinary and straight and normal. And then you go and dye your hair and I just can't cope with it." And it struck me as being incredibly ironic that she was saying, "You're so normal, you're so ordinary, you're so average. And now you're trying to look trendy."
It's intentional almost by you. It's cold. It's cold, isn't it? Shoulders,
I've got all my stuff packed up. I've got all my stuff packed up. There's a hell of a lot of it, I'm afraid. Okay.
What do you look like?
You're so tired, alright?
Thomas.
Did you bring up both cards or not? No, your card
No,
doesn't
your
start.
car doesn't start. It hasn't been tried for 10 weeks.
10?
Yes.
Oh, God.
What have you been doing?
Just dyeing my hair and getting drunk, things like that.
Well, I'm not very pleased with you.
Will you be able to come on Tuesday to pick up the rest of the stuff?
Yes, I shall come on Tuesday and pick you up. Your car
Okay.
does not start. It's as
All right.
dead as a dodo.
Yeah.
It needs servicing.
Well, it needs. Is it just the battery? Or what? I think just the battery.
Well,
yeah.
it's the battery, and you know,
Right.
the gears were
Exactly.
never very good.
Do you want a cup of tea or something?
Well,
That's
very
more
nice.
cool drink with that. Well, I haven't got
What
any
have
cool
you
drink apart from
Well,
water.
put the kettle on. It would be nice to have a cup of coffee.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, obviously I do despair of Thomas at the moment, not because of himself, but because he's going through this stage of following the extremes of fashion and generally sort of appearing a little scruffy, to say the least. I don't know what to do with that son of ours. Oh, dear, oh dear, oh dear. Now look at the mess of this place. I find myself having to do the sort of things that often a man in the family would do. Oh dear. I've come all this way to face this. It's chaos, isn't it?
She's really into tidiness and cleanliness. You must look clean, you must cut your fingernails, you must wear a jacket and a tie and a jersey at the least, and clean shoes and shirts and trousers and the rest of it. And you must look smart, because it's bad enough being short, but if you're scruffy as well, people are just going to think you're ridiculous. What?
Thomas,
What, this
you
mess?
haven't done any packing
I
at
have,
all.
all right.
I mean, look at it all.
I've had people following me around for a few days.
Right, where do we start?
I don't want anybody to make allowances for me. I think I can live a normal life as much as anybody else. I think I can be quite successful at what I want to do, and I think I can help people. I hope so.
I mean, what I do object to sometimes is when I'm taking Thomas back and I'm humping a trunk, and Thomas is sort of wafted off, carrying 2 books or something, you know, which is frequently the case. And now at university the same thing happens, and he's departed, you know, in a great sort of flurry to talk to all the girlfriends, leaving Mum to cope with carrying everything upstairs to his room.
There are 10,000 people of restricted growth living in Britain today. They may be students, doctors, actors, craftsmen, scientists or secretaries, and for most of them their only handicap is their size. But their greatest problem is us, for they must learn to live in what is for them anything but a small world.
Oh yeah, I mean deep down I want to be a normal height because I would have liked to be something in sports. Most likely a footballer, you know. Who knows, maybe in the next world.